After days of looking for clues about the circle of powerful individuals that seem to plot your every move and cross your plans again and again, you finally found the hint you were looking for. You keep one hand on your dagger while you move through the old parts of the harbor. One of the old piers that had not been used to load cargo for decades, you find a former warehouse that has been converted into an inn. The worn-out words on the wooden sign over the door tell you that this is the place that you have been looking for. You can hear laughter and smell pipe smoke coming from the inside of the Plot Hook Inn. When you enter, the laughter stops and people stare at you. Your blood seems to turn into ice when you realize that you seem to know each and every person in here. Over there at the bar is the beautiful maiden you once rescued and who turned out to be a powerful demon. Sitting next to it, the blacksmith who made your sword. On the left, you see a bunch of pirates you once sailed with, and on the same table a group of orcish bandits you fought and killed not more than a month ago. On the right, the bridge troll you outsmarted to get to this very town, who appears to play chess with the wise witch that once saved you from a deadly poison. There's only one table of people you don't know. They sit in the midst of it all. A shade of mist seems to cover their presence, like they are only partly in this plane of existence. Then, suddenly, one of them turns, looks you in the eyes, and says, "Hi, I'm Daniel Wallace, and this is the Plot Hook Inn. This is a show about game mastering, where we talk about topics related to that. And this show is about the dark side. That means death of characters, player versus player, mutilation, and other fun things that can happen to your characters. Sorry for badly butchering the intro. I should have trained it some more. These are my guests. Would you please introduce yourself? Nick, we'll start with you.
Hi, my name's Nick, also known as Farlander from the Geek and Sundry forums. Hi.
Jody?
Hi, my name is Jody, also known as Trainer Jody on the internets and forums and Twitter and a lot of other places. I'm co-founder of the All for Geek Alliance and Dungeon Master on Wednesday nights.
I have to follow that up?
Yeah.
I'm bad. I used to be a DM on Wednesday nights until Jody came along with his Trainer Jody stuff and kicked me out. And then he looped me into this. No, all joking aside, I'm Ben. I've been DMing or playing role-playing since, geez. Actually, I used role-playing to figure out how to do math and solve math, calculus back when AD&D was popular. And had Deco. But anyways, I digress. So thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here.
Those of you that watch other things on the All for Geek Alliance may recognize his face from the new trailer for D&D High. He is the new member of the D&D High party. So
that's where I know him from.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
All the time.
Name's George.
Okay, great. I changed the format around a little bit from the last time, and I wanted to get away from the interview format that we had going on there and get this more into a discussion. So, if anybody of you has something to object or has anything to say about something somebody else says, be polite, but just go in there and voice your opinion. And I will not ask questions this time. I will just put up some thesis and see where the conversation takes us with those. So the first thesis I will put up is a character should never die just because they rolled off a die, and I will always use my jamming powers to prevent that. This is not necessarily my opinion, but I would like to hear yours. So, should a character die just because a bad dice roll? Nick.
Well, I don't know. Any generalization has generally got a flaw built into it someplace. There's always going to be some exception to it. So always use your powers. I think I try and avoid situations where a character can die from a single lousy bad roll, but I've had plenty of situations where characters got a cumulative string of really horrible dice rolls where they were trying their best. They often started off in a situation where they took a little bit of a risk, and then it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And eventually, you roll enough 01s on percentiles or 1 on a 20 or something like that, and the consequences can, in fact, lead to death. So I don't like the Deus Ex Machina powers of the GM to always give the player the feeling like they can push the envelope, take any risk, any threat, and never have to worry about the possibility that their character can die. And if you take out the potential for dying as a result of a bad dice roll, they can definitely start to get that impression pretty quickly.
I think, for the most part, I'm not a big fan of like the roll or die situations where you can just be walking around and then spring a trap, accidentally roll poorly, and then your character is gone. You have to re-roll a new one. However, there are, and I've used this before with some of the groups that just get a little bit too cocky. If you put a situation in where, like, the occasional use of a roll or die or a roll or maim, something like that, will force the party to start playing more conservatively, and it will wake them up really, really quickly. So I think there's a time and place for it, but if you end up killing characters off too often with just a random die roll, eventually your players get pissed.
I love it. I think it's absolutely amazing when you have there's something as a player and there's achievements as a player and there's achievements as a DM where you have that wonderful moment where, and I've done this a couple of times, where you're walking along in a room and there's all these skeletons lined up and you go up to the first one and you smash it and the DM is just like, not a zombie or not a skeleton. You're like, perfect. And you just keep on walking and not checking all the rest of them. And then the next thing you know, you just got like 5 OA attacks. I did that once. That was awesome. That was definitely, I think, to me, like, if you're going to do roll or die, I think if the character is doing something incredibly dumb, I think we brought it up earlier, is like you have to, it seems really dumb as a DM not to be like, oh, yeah, you didn't really die that time, because then they're just going to keep doing the really dumb things. And we've had characters, and I've had a group on Wednesday that I let the dumb character keep going, and before you know it, you're like, this guy is doing some of the most, he's well outside of the normal path or guidelines that we have going. And so I think there's always this
He'll
feeling.
turn it into a dumb campaign if you let him.
Yeah, and that's kind of the problem too. Is like you forget that like retreat is an option.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Like I forget
it should be an option, and I think that's the point. If you are playing a game where you are walking down the street and you get attacked, whoa! And well, in that case, it's really unfair to just let someone die just because of a crit or something.
Sure,
but if you really give them the chance to figure out, well, this is a bad part of town, maybe we should hire some muscles to accompany us so that nobody will really think it's a good idea to attack us, or where you give them any opportunity to avoid the situation that would get so dangerous that it would actually kill them with one die roll or multiple die rolls. And that's the style of play that forces you to cheat to keep characters alive. Mm-hmm. And I generally avoid that style of play.
Well, and you also, by putting in situations, like I ran a dungeon once that was Tomb of Horror style, designed to kill people off unless you're really, really careful. And the first time something bad happens, where a character dies or something massive happens, the ability of the players, either they all rage quit and flip the table, or the ability of the players instantly jumps up, because then they start realizing, oh, and as soon as they go, well, how could we have avoided that? You mentioned, well, if you check for traps or something, they immediately start going, oh, well, then that's what I'm going to do. So, roll. Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, that's like when we first started playing Wednesday night games, I didn't know the dynamics of our group. I mean, you had the swords made, and I was like, well, you're our fighter, so I'm just going to beat the snot out of you and see what happens. You remember that goblin that could rope you up and then pull you into his armor, and you just kept sitting there like I tried to bamf. So you'd bamf away, and then I'd loop you in and pull you in and knock. I basically just kept knocking you out the whole game. But I realized like you're a player that found that entertaining because you could visualize that, where I couldn't do that to our new rogue, who was again reading this book while literally reading the book at the table while at the same time reading in character. Because if I did it to her, she would just, and not whatever else, but this player would just basically be like, I'm done. Like, you could tell this is the type of person that if I did a roll or die on them, this would be like, I'm never playing RPGs again. Where with you, you'd just be like, that was awesome. That's the coolest story ever. Like, I'm trying to run away, and he keeps bringing me back in, and I'm dying. I think, and that's kind of like one of those, back to like the ambush thing. It's if it's part of the story and it builds to the story and the climax, like, hey, do you remember when Jody's character died off? Yeah, maybe we shouldn't just run into a room next time and let the guy teleport 50 feet in front of us. We can't do anything about it. Like, apparently our DM lets us do dumb things. Okay.
So I spent the entire battle on the ground unconscious.
Well, then
like, I don't think I don't. I would wake up, I would run away, and then this stupid guy would like throw a chain at me and then slam me, and then I'd be dead again. It was fun, but yeah, I don't think I did a single point of damage in the entire battle.
You were literally the meat shield. It was awesome. It was, but it added to the story. Like I think if you can add to the story and you know, like, helps you, it's great. But I think there are those other times when a DM has a personal vendetta against you, the person, not you, the character. That gets annoying. Like I remember in a couple of games where I was a cleric, and out of nowhere, like, this monster like runs through everybody to take me out. I'm just like, well, I'm the guy in the back. Like, well, it's because your guy is worships Cord. No, I don't. I worship the sea goddess. Like, what? I'm not even supposed to be here.
I worship the fluffy bunnies and hugs.
Well, do you remember the last game where it's like, okay, fine, I'll take it. Like, but anyways.
I think we all mentioned being stupid or doing stupid things at some point.
I think most of us have done them too.
Yeah, obviously. So is for you, is doing something stupid or whatever a requirement to die in a game, or can it just happen that?
Well, it's not necessarily stupidity, but there's sort of the risk-taking. So you can sort of tell how much threat you feel about going into a situation, and so there's that level of sense of invulnerability that people sometimes carry with their characters. So I think if they've got that impression, they'll sometimes take risks where statistically the probability of coming out of that without a major limb being lost or death occurring ought to be pretty small enough to discourage them from going out and doing that thing. So sometimes it's a deliberate intention. Sometimes they feel like they've got the motivation to try something desperate, and other times they've just got the sort of conviction that they'll be able to pull through because they'll be able to manipulate the dice and all of the power gaming stuff that they've got sort of under their belt, ready to pull out every stop to survive something which really looks insurvivable. I think it's risk.
I know one of the things that I tend to do, at least with stupidity, like I tend to reward my players for playing really smart and creatively. Like I'll put puzzles and things in that if they come up with a unique way to solve it, or they come up with something, like I will give them automatic successes and stuff like that. Like if they're creative, I'm going to reward that. And if they're stupid, I'm going to do the exact same thing in reverse. If I had a player once that they were trying to get some information from the shopkeeper, and everyone else is trying, diplomacy or trying maybe to intimidate them or something like that. And he just comes in and says, okay, I fire a magic missile at his shop and I start breaking stuff. And he'd been playing really, really aggressively, and he was a lawful, or he was a neutral good player. Like he was a good person in character, but he was just being completely, quote unquote.
The alignment issue?
Yeah, the alignment issue.
Sounds like chaotic dick, yeah.
Yeah, chaotic dick. And so I finally, the best phrase in the world that I use as a DM is the phrase, "Are you sure you want to do that?" because that's my little hint to my players that you've just done something colossally stupid, and I'm going to give you a chance. And nobody realizes, like the first time they hear the "Are you sure you want to do that?" and they've never heard it before, they don't understand that I'm about to screw you over majorly. I'm giving you an option to get out. And so this kid, he's like, "No, that's what I'm going to do." I said, "Okay." So 2 guards appear and point their spears at you. He goes, I prepare this spell. And I said, and you can hear 30 other guards outside preparing to storm the building. He's like, what? And then I looked at the rest of the group, and the rest of the group goes, we run away and don't save his ass at all. And this kid is sitting there going, but, and so for the rest of the campaign, anytime he was in a populated place within this city or any important people around, he had 2 guards that disarmed him, and he got to just sit by the sidelines while the rest of the players got to actually interact with the campaign. And he learned real quick, maybe I shouldn't do stupid things.
Well, the other thing, too, is our stupid thing is we've been playing for so long. That, like, as a new player, you have no idea it's stupid until you do it. I mean, the first time you fall in an acid trap because you forgot to check for perception. This is like back in the old school, like when, do you see the monsters? I don't know, give me a perception check. Darn it, 5. Darn it, 5. That's like that Order of the Stick cartoon. Why is our rogue failing perception checks? I don't know, but I have a funny feeling we're surrounded. I mean, it's just like that. Those are really good stories, but those are at the same time are like, you don't know it's stupid until you've done it, and then the next time you do it. Like, from now on, I mean, we were talking earlier, like, how, I walked into a room and all these zombies killed me. From now on, whenever I play any mission where there's a chance for these skeletons, you better believe I'm like stabbing everything, and I'm walking in. I'm just like, here we go. And I mean, that guy died, but it's like, everyone's like, why did you do this? I'm like, I have this weird sensation that Victor is telling me from beyond, stab everything. So I'm just like, and people are just like, what is he doing? He's like, he died in an earlier campaign.
It's the OCD adventurer.
Well,
Let's check it, record 3 times.
Really make sure they're dead. I mean, like,
I don't really like the phrase, are you sure you want to do that? Because it's too much on the head, but I do something very, very similar to that, where I step back a little bit. I'm like, well, okay, I'm not sure if you understood the situation right. There are these guys there who are really big and all armed, and they've got these big guns, and they look really unhappy about what you were doing there. So are you really going to insult their mothers, keeping in mind that there are these big guys who are all armed and who look already pissed at you? And kind of hammer it in.
Even that's too heavy-handed for me, but I do occasionally have a situation
I overdid it a little there, yeah.
you've got a player who says he wants to do something, and you feel like he's missing a piece of information about the scene, so I sort of step back long enough to at least explain something, some detail of the scene or the world, the character, whatever it is, and then make sure they understand that before they go forward with it.
And I can understand that completely, because it happens to me all the time. Just on our last game night on Tuesday, I think, there was a bar fight in a saloon, and at one point I decided that my character would pull this revolver and stop the fight, just because I misunderstood the term he steps over him. What the game master meant is he steps over the guy who he just KO'd, and to go for the next guy, and I understood he would step over him to finish him off. Oh. And so at that situation, at some point I understood what was happening. I was like, oh, dude, you meant this and not that, because that's what I understood. And the GM was, no,
clarification.
The other thing. And he was like, okay, let's. You don't want to do this then? And I was like, no, definitely not. Okay, so we just dialed it back, and I took my actions back, and that was that. And I think that's an absolutely okay thing to do, because misunderstandings on the gaming table happen all the time, and these what you say is what you do things is nice to get players in check who always blurb out the first thing that comes to your mind, however stupid it is. But if you've been playing for a while, as I said, misunderstandings happen.
It tends, when you force people to do whatever the first thing they thought of, even if they misunderstood a situation, it kind of kills creativity to the point where they're afraid to do anything. Yeah, so I don't mind fudging, letting them redo something if I have to do the. By the way, you do realize that this, and this, right? Oh no, I didn't realize it. Okay, then are you sure? I've also found that due to the fact that I can be a very vindictive DM and I enjoy killing people off every so often, I found that after they've gotten used to the idea of if I say, are you sure you want to do that, that means something bad is about to happen, every so often, just to throw them off, I will say, are you sure you want to do that, when they've picked a completely safe, logical manner just to mess with their heads.
I mean, like,
You should really get into horror role-playing games. I've got the feeling you're the perfect GM for that, because you have to be a little sadistic for that, and everybody knows what they hopefully knows what they're getting into. So you should really try that.
You can be Trainer Jody and Jaded Jody all in one shot. No, like, I was gonna say, like, what I try to do with a lot of the new players too is kind of bring up, now, is that what you personally would do, or is this what your player would do, or your character would do? So that way they kind of get into their head, like, oh, right, I'm playing this character, so is my character really going to do these things, which kind of helps you get around, like, the crazy guy that all of a sudden thinks he has an 18 in wisdom when really he has an 8, or the lawful good paladin playing as a chaotic evil, or vice versa, the rogue playing, good. So it kind of helps that dynamic get around, because I think too often sometimes the players just, I mean, I do it, I still do it, and that's why I always play a halfling, but you automatically start playing in this mindset, like, this is how I'm going to run this character, and it's going to mimic what I do in life, not, oh wait, this is a potential for me to do something completely different and go off somewhere else and play a lawful good versus chaotic evil character is kind of fun sometimes.
Yeah, I've realized that before, since especially Jody and you, Ben, are often playing with completely new people who are completely new to the game, or RPGs in general, and Nick and I tend to play with veterans who have had hours and hours, if not years or decades, under their belt. It really influences how your GMing style turns out to be.
Well, to bring it back to the discussion that we're having right now, obviously you guys must have played at some point in your career with new players before to kind of get them into it. As far as killing off new players or maiming new players, is that something like, if you have two people that are playing in the same campaign, but one of them is a veteran that's been playing for a while, and another one of them is brand new, never done it before, are you going to weight the death possibility towards the one that's the veteran, or are you going to be kind of non-partial, and if something happens where someone could die,
I think your job as a game master is to make the situation clear for the players. So again, I've got players who've been with me for decades, and they're pretty good about, if I set up a situation, I describe something that their character's involved in, and they don't know exactly some detail that's important to them, they'll ask me before they declare that I'm going to start shooting up this shop and threatening merchants. So they'll just try and establish facts either about the specific scene they're in, or something about how law enforcement works in that world. So they'll try and get some information. But in terms of sort of changing the threat level, I might try and introduce a new player into the game through a setting where it's not intrinsically that perilous. That is to say, they can fool around, they have a chance to, the traps might hurt rather than kill instantly if they're encountering that. So if you want to get them used to the idea of looking around for things that might jump out and bite you, you can do that in a way that isn't instantly, oh, you've just fallen into a pit of leeches, and they immediately suck all your blood out and you're dying. So they get pulled out. Covered in leeches.
Wow.
Pit of leeches.
Yes. A friend of mine.
Sucks the life out of you.
Yeah.
I'm totally using that in my campaign. I don't care if it doesn't fit.
With
Found a
with
new
the Dark
template.
Eye, the German role-playing system, the German fantasy role-playing system I've mentioned countless times before, there actually is one kind of leeches that sucks out your experience points.
Hmm.
Dude, that would be a big move.
I think it was mosquitoes, but leeches would also work.
That would be so much fun if you're just wandering through like a swamp or something, and then randomly it's like, oh, by the way,
You're
you
not
suddenly you're level
suddenly
20,
feel
and
like
then
you can't cook
you're
anymore.
level 4.
The sword is a lot heavier than it used to be.
My answer would actually have been pretty similar to that of Nick. I think I would also dial it down a little bit, but try to get new players. Well, I actually do that. So I will try to get new players to learn the mechanics without having the consequences be that bad. You're such a lovely
You
company.
can really scale the campaign to suit almost any sort of theme you want to, and you can definitely level the danger up or down depending on how much you want to throw at players. You can make a sort of a fun experience to explore around in, to have a sense of potential danger, and then the excitement you get from coming out of it successfully or almost successfully with most of your limbs intact. And it's the sort of thing that's typically going to encourage a player, in my experience, more than if they're playing for half an hour and then their character that they spent the first 20 minutes building gets killed off by the first arrow in the neck that gets fired their way.
Now, to continue down this route, not to completely hijack this, have you guys? Yeah. Have you guys had a bad experience with killing someone off and like rage quit or anything?
He said no energy.
Oh, yeah.
I've actually had a really, really fun experience with somebody rage quitting a group. There was this really, really annoying player, and we're going to get into the story time mode this time, where everybody tells the story from an RPG group. There was this group with one really annoying player, and it was less the character and more the player, actually. And he also was, well, his frustration tolerance was not that high, to say the least. And he would threaten to quit the group at least once per game night. And finally, everybody has had it with him. And he also acted kind of stupid often. And so he got in danger again, and he didn't get out. And he finally said that if my character dies now, I'm going to leave the group. And the Game Master was about to roll behind his Game Master thingy there.
Green.
And he actually put the dice back down, and you didn't hear him. It was like the damage roll was still up or something. And he put the dice back down, looked him straight in the eyes, and said, "You're dead. Leave." Everybody was like, "Yep." And that was the last we saw of him.
I had a player that he was a fun guy to play with, but he got ticked off really, really easily. And so on a fairly regular basis, if something like if he was to miss too many times or something like that, because he was playing your basic pally tank type guy, so his job was basically to run in, bop some people on the head, and then just get hit over and over and over again. And he didn't quite understand that that was what was supposed to happen.
That's a
So
terrible
he'd come
job
in and
description.
what was that?
That's a terrible job description. Just
Yeah. Surprisingly enough, there aren't too many people like, I totally want to go get the crap kicked out of me every day. But retail is still populated with employees. So yeah, we had a couple of times where he would go in, like he'd charge or something into a battle, would miss like 3 or 4 times, and would literally stand up and like pace my apartment, because I'd run the games in my apartment, and he would pace my apartment saying words that can't be repeated in any company, And the rest of us would just kind of sit there and go. And the game master was brand new. He'd never been a master before, and so he's just sitting there going, "What am I supposed to do?" And the rest of us are just sitting there. And we let him go on his little tirade, and then we kind of scoot our chairs away when he sat back down in case we were going to get killed. And he was big. Like, I'm 6'4". This guy was at least as tall as I was, but had actual muscle mass. And so he was kind of a terrifying guy.
I think my best example of a weird story with character death is me actually dying. My friend was running a game for a while and had been setting up for like a couple weeks in a row, I think, by this point, and it was a very strange setup. I didn't really understand the theme of the campaign very well. He established it with an opening story where he kind of created this newspaper article calling for people to come and join up with this group, and it was very open-ended. It was set in like a modern setting, someplace in New York. We went to this building. We go up. It's a lot of weird psychological stuff as you're going through it. But it's like you're into some sort of adventuring job application. It's not very clear, and the only thing I knew out of game was that we were sort of being cultivated into some kind of superhero squad. But the whole process of going through that was all these weird mind games and personality test quizzes and all these tests that they were running on all the candidates who were showing up, and people were being weeded out, and there were competitions going on. And the character that I built and brought in was getting more and more psychologically creeped out by the whole thing. I built up a stealth type of character, and so I spent a lot of time just sneaking around and seeing what everybody else was doing and what was going on in the scenes. And I kept seeing more and more things that were just weird and inexplicable, and it freaked me more out. And then it reached a crux when suddenly I got drawn into some weird psychic dream type of vision, as it seemed, and then there was some guy who popped up, and I'm pretty sure that the game master intended for this character in this dream that got forced on me to be like a friendly intervention or somebody I could get to know and talk to and help me out. But I was so keyed up at this point that I saw him first, shot him, and was basically doing my best to try, and then he wouldn't die. So I tried to kill him again, and then I was convinced that it was a dream. So finally, I had like one bullet left, and I shot myself in the head. At which point, the game master was sort of scratching his head and looking over. I don't think he understood what was going on quite in my mind at that point, or how I was reacting to things. But he said, this isn't actually entirely a dream. You're not going to wake up from that bullet. I said, okay. That was just a game I was okay with that character dying off, and ended up making a different character joining in much later on. But that was such a weird setting for me that it made more sense for that character that I'd gone through that experience to just die.
Oh, great. Ben, do you have a story to share, or shall we move on?
I don't have any good ones. I mean, typically when I'm playing, I usually play like, I'm either playing like a rogue or a fighter, or usually the melee classes, because the magic's just never got to me because of 3.5 was just so complicated about memorizing which spells you had. You didn't have that type of a thing. So, no, most of my stories are just like the typical wizard, like just in a dead panic all of a sudden out of nowhere, like when he finally gets hit, and like I don't know who.
Oh my God! I experienced pain.
Yeah, I mean, it's like one of those things where like you're looking at him like I've been hit the entire game, and you get 1 hit point, and you're now they have 4. It's like, well then here's an idea: don't move forward, But no, I think half the time they're not bad stories, because when I look back on it, it's just like, yeah, that was me playing my character and being dumb and not checking for traps, or surrounding myself by 10 people, or taking on a red dragon when I was only level 4. I mean, I think that's probably my favorite story is the game old, like, oh, look at a cave. I go into the cave. You see a red dragon sleeping. I poke the red dragon, and then the next thing I'm being eaten. But that's just I mean, but there's nothing where I feel like they're bad. They're bad in the sense of just, I think they're really funny stories because of the way I play my characters. They're always goofy. I mean, if I'm playing at an 8 wisdom character, they're going to be an 8 wisdom character who wanders into the dumbest situations ever. And if they're butt ugly but pretend like they're superhumans, that's my current. I have a Titan.
Isn't 8 low end average?
What?
What's the scale here? Isn't 8 a low end average? This is like a 1 to 8.
10 is in D&D. 10 is like your average human.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Below,
I thought like 8 to 12.
Yeah. Well,
if
actually,
you have anything below an 8 in wisdom, you can't speak properly.
Yeah.
Like you have you know, ugg eat meat. Those would be 7 wisdom and lower. So if you're an 8, you're just barely above ugg eat meat.
I mean, you can talk like a 5-year-old is what it is. So it's awesome. It's a wonderful person to play as a fighter. You just me smash, me grunka. What else do you do?
Yeah.
Drink up.
it frees up points for strength and dexterity and all the useful stuff.
Yeah, I mean, like the important stuff. I mean, but yeah, no. Sorry.
I guess I'm trying to figure out if that's the 8 and the 7, what's the 4 and the 3 look like?
Oh.
those are basically, I think, depending on the version that you're playing, they actually define, like, once you get below, I think it's like 6 or 5, you're no longer sentient.
Yeah.
Like, you're like a dog or something. Like,
okay, so
maybe humanoid.
Spectrum, you just know need for your dice system to work.
Yeah.
So I just want to jump in here with another thesis of mine, which is a little player versus player from time to time is good to keep the game flowing. And this is also not necessarily my own opinion, but I would like to hear yours.
it makes, well, I mean, it's the central theme of some games, like if you've ever played Paranoia. You can't really do that game without interplanetary conflict.
I think you have to say a word or two about Paranoia, Nick, for everybody of our viewers who doesn't know it.
Paranoia was a game, still is a game as far as I know, where you've got, it's built around the idea of character death too. You've got, I think, 6 clones when you start off. They're identical, so as soon as your character dies, they rocket out a new clone and takes your place within half an hour or so of the character death, generally speaking. But the basic precepts are it's a sort of a computer-controlled society where mutants are forbidden and secret societies are forbidden, and your character starts by choosing your secret society and your mutation. So everybody's trying to protect their particular secrets from coming out, whether they're a communist or they've got weird teleportation powers or something like that, and yet use all of those connections and powers to advance and undercut everybody else. And generally speaking, your objective is to try and make everybody else in your party take the blame for everything that goes wrong. And pretty much the whole campaign is everything going wrong.
Yeah, and the job of the game master is to make things go wrong for you.
Yeah.
I think with player versus player, I think it's one of those things like if, like I'm currently training a new DM. And if you're new and you don't understand how to effectively use, inter-party conflict, I think it's something that's better left avoided, because it's so easy. I've had groups that I've played in where there's been inter-party conflict that has basically ruined the game because people will start taking it personally, and or something will happen where one of the characters gets a good roll or another character gets a bad roll, and one of the characters dies or loses out on a really, wanted, needed piece of loot or something like that. And yeah, it just tends to break group cohesiveness, which once you start getting into higher level dungeons and things like that, your ability to work together as a team is a lot more important and will save your life a hell of a lot more than having the best armor or the best stats or something like that. So I think it can be useful, but I think it's not something for a new DM to really mess around with too much, because there's far too much of a chance of your players just rage quitting or leaving because they don't like it.
And then for us, we always play a game shop, so we never know who's going to show up. And you get the power gamers, you get the newbies, you get everybody in between there. And I can't tell you how many times on a Wednesday game session you'd sit there and you're just like, these two are going to go at it, and I have no idea how to move it around. And and that's the hardest part of being a DM is like you can use that as a plot hook and move that around and make it work for you. But I mean, I could tell like when I was running our game, one of the biggest issues was our power gamer was so smart and so good at what he did. He sometimes forgot that everybody else at the table is not a power gamer, and so he could come off as kind of brash and arrogant. But once you got to know him, it was awesome. But there were times that between him and our token rogue, it was just like, you know, you could just tell like, oh, here we go again. And there are times like we had a really creative player, and he, you know, thank goodness for his imagination, and I let him do everything he wanted, but I allowed it because I liked it and I liked where it would go, and I thought it added this flair because we had a blackguard bard in the group, and I was like, you're the guy that made a blackguard bard, and you're giving me flack over a guy that can climb 14 squares and do all these crazy backflips and whatnot, and I think that's awesome, and I think it's great because you're supposed to be the serious one, death to all, but let me sing you a power ballad about it versus this tree hugging hippie over here who's like, hey, I love everybody, you know.
I climbed the tree.
Yeah, and that was great, but there were tense moments when I'm like, oh, this is gonna backfire so bad, and I mean, even with you playing the sword mage bamfing around it, there were times that like, I think there's always player versus DM, but I think even between me and you, once in a while, we were sitting there like, one of us has to give up, and is it me or is it you? And it's kind of like, all right, I'll do it this time, but that's the hardest thing. Like doing a wide open, you have no idea who's gonna show up. It can be brutal. Like you get that one guy, like you're saying that you know he makes one roll and he fails and he just gets up from that table and rage quits. I don't know where all of a sudden people forget they're in a giant public space and they're rage quitting and kind of just like, oh, I hate this game.
Hulk smash! Break the table.
As long as nobody really flips the table.
There are a couple times.
Hey, with all these electronic devices laying around on gaming tables, I think that would lead to some player versus player in the real world.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You see people just start picking up random blunt objects. It's like, do I have to roll to smack him in the head?
How did this guy die? It looks like he died by a deck of Munchkin.
I think we're actually all on the same page here. There are some gaming systems in some gaming worlds, like the World of Darkness, for example, with especially when you're playing Vampire or Mage, where player versus player really is the salt in the soup and really makes the game brilliant. But it can break a group really fast, especially with Shadowrun, which I've played a lot in the 3rd edition. It usually gets violent pretty quickly, and as soon as that happens, one character is going to die, and if he's not going to die, he's going to kill the other one on the other character on the first chance he gets. So player characters killing each other is not really great for a game to move on.
Well, and I had a situation where I let people kind of play whatever alignment that they want to. And in the table that I'm playing right now, that means I have a lot of people that tend to play good aligned characters. But I have one who's playing this mage that's lawful evil, which generally means that most of the stuff that he does is all self-motivated, and he can get along with the party every so often. But there was one instance when we were just doing a one-shot where they got to a point where one of them would have had to sacrifice themselves to get to the next area, and both the players were really good friends, and they knew each other, and they really didn't conflict. They worked really well together. But as soon as they saw it was about to happen, they both kind of looked at each other and went, "We're going to fight, aren't we?" And the other one would go, "Yeah, that there really is no way around this. My character would never sacrifice himself, and you're not going to either." He's like, "Yeah." And so they went and they duked it out, and the evil character died because he was a mage versus a monk. But yeah, so I think
I've always noticed too. It's your campaign setting kind of does it. Like I've played Shadowruns before too, and I've noticed like the minute you put mechanical weapons like guns and bazookas and machine guns, the level for like confrontation goes exponentially quicker. I mean, there's something about like I shoot you with a crossbow bolt. It's humorous right now, but like at the same time, you're just like I'm just gonna thump him a quick one with my mallet to make him pay attention. In Shadowrun, you're just like, nah, I'm gonna pull out my SMG and just burst a couple rounds real quick. Let's see how this goes. And people are like, really? Like you're really gonna do that? It's like, yeah, what the heck? We could fix them later on with a couple of nanos. It's like, oh boy, you know. And I think that's kind of like, I do love player versus player because it does give that really cool story at the end of the day about like you have this really cool story. These two people have this conflict with the player, and they both are. I mean, they're probably gonna go back and be like, do you remember the time that you were the monk and I was the mage, and I was trying to magic missile you, and you just, you know, did your Fu Manchu on me, and the next thing I'm like, you know, like that's really cool stuff. But when you have the two randoms, I couldn't imagine that if it was two random people being like, wait a minute, how's this gonna go? But well, we had the rogue who kept stealing things from people. She'd pass notes to people, or pass notes to me, or pass notes to you, and be like, the next thing you know, you'd be like, all right, we're ready for combat. I draw my sword and shield. You don't have that. What? And so like this rogue was just taking everything out of everybody, and it was great. But at the same time, that was an interesting dichotomy in like 30 seconds. Like, I try to cast a spell. You don't have the spell book.
I think I have lost, in that campaign, I lost more money than I earned.
Oh, yeah.
Every day. Like, either, because I was playing a lawful stupid. And I continually, like, anytime I'd get money, either she would steal it from me, or she would convince me to give it to her. Because she was poor, or because she was going to donate it to orphans or something. And I was lawful stupid, so I went with it.
She even convinced you she should be the accountant.
So she kept all the money.
It was awesome.
We couldn't figure out why the books never matched up.
Yeah, we did this brilliant move where we gave the group treasure kind of to the rogue in one setting, because we thought, well, the rogue is going to be responsible for this, so if the rogue steals from the group treasure now, she will be responsible for it. And well, on the beginning of one gaming night, the character was there with a new character. The player was there with a new character, and she was like, well, you kind of had it coming, and we just found a note saying, rogue stays rogue. It was really consequent, I have to say. So, player versus player, difficult thing, lot of fun, but usually leads to the death of one character. If you can pull it off, it's a brilliant thing. To sum it up, if nobody has objections. And I think what Nick actually said in the beginning, a game being built around player versus player, already having this clone mechanism, which can get you in the game after you die really, really quickly, speaks volumes about how this usually goes.
The reason that's important for that game, too, is that clone backup system means you've got the same exact character. You don't have to now spend half an hour making up a new character every time a character dies. So a game that takes that into account is if you're playing some intricate game where the mechanics of creating a character take a long time, and you're creating a backstory for every character, and you're trying to fit them into the story of the campaign, and then they're dying every week, that can be extra frustrating, I expect.
That's actually something really interesting, because I found that many games where characters die a lot have really quick character generation systems. The first one that comes to my mind is the Call of Cthulhu role-playing system, where making a character takes something like 5 minutes if you know what you're doing. And Call of Cthulhu characters die or go insane all the time. It's basically the point of the whole game.
That'd be a really cool poll. To like sit there and do a time lapse to see like how quickly did these people rage out? Was, you know, like, because I bet you hands down it's got to be D&D people that rage out the fastest.
Probably, yeah, because they, and I think what Daniel and Nick have mentioned, you know, basically the amount of time you put into the character, I think, is directly related to how how much of a chance there is of you going crazy if you kill off the character. Like, I mean, Pathfinder is a really complicated character build system where you can spend hours. D&D 3.5, which is basically the same thing, is the same way where you could literally spend 3 or 4 hours building your character if you wanted to get that technical. And then you're playing like PFS where they have a lot of roll or die situations, and you just spent hours building your character, and within the first 20 minutes of the game the character's dead, and due to the rules of Pathfinder Society, which is tracked and everything, that character's gone and you're done. You get to roll a brand new character.
And I mean, D&D Next is bringing their system out, which will be interesting to see if they go to that extreme of you can't be like, oh, this is Bob the First will meet his little brother Bob the Second, who's exactly, or his twin brother Bob the Second, who's the exact same thing. I mean, that was a big move on Pathfinder that they did. That I swear at Gen Con there were more people, and that's like watching people play cards, like play Texas Hold'em, where they're shaking this dice for like 20 minutes, like come on, and they throw it, and then the next they look down and they just faint. They're like, ah. Because, I mean, like, it takes forever to level up in that game, especially on that society thing. But to watch them just go from, like, like just getting ready to rage out and all that backstory they had in it, and the next thing, they got to walk away. And I don't know. Maybe it's because of the years of being a DM for so long. I've just been like, whatever, it's a player. I'll just go make a new one.
Yeah.
I'll figure it out.
Okay, yeah, well, it's especially understandable if people rage quit or are really, really upset if your character dies that they've played for maybe years or even longer.
Yeah.
So, okay. I really want to get to one more point that Nick brought up. And I said I wouldn't pose any questions, but I will. Because never is like 35 minutes for me. What happens after a character dies? So, Nick, you actually started a whole campaign by letting everybody die.
Well, yeah, I started off a game that was designed to be a ghost story. But every campaign that I've done has been very different and often completely different worlds. I've had games that were based around gods, where you're potentially killing off an avatar, sort of setting somebody back to a point where their Atman, their soul, can reform and create a new avatar eventually, and they lose a certain amount of their potential or resources that they had accumulated for a time, but they're not necessarily extinguished from the world in the same way that if you've got your rogue or cleric in a D&D game and a 1,000-ton boulder falls on your head, kind of the end for you. But I've also had plenty of games where it was much more lethal, and sometimes the players had entertaining times in their dying moments. A lot of players like to ham it up in those particular moments. I had one guy who was, I think, a wizard who was climbing up some cliffs. I'm not sure why he was climbing up them, but he failed a precarious climbing roll and failed a try and scrabble and catch hold roll, and then was plummeting to a distance where there was really no chance of survival. And so his last declaration was to look downward and say, I want to hit that rock right there. And so he rolled for that, and that's where he succeeded. Splattered himself across a specific rock on the ground.
Which is a big deal. I mean, if you're going to go out by splattering, if you can choose the splatter point. I mean,
right, you get a sense of control back, yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. One of the things when I first started DMing, I used to do a lot was Chris Perkins, who works for Wizards of the Coast for D&D, used to have this article that he did every week called the DM Experience, where he talked about being a DM. And one of the first articles I read was the idea that death never has to be the end of the campaign or even the character, because if you really want to, like if you TPK your party completely, everybody just dies, there are other options. You can make them re-roll and start a new campaign if you want to go that route. and some people would prefer that because by the time you get to the point where you TPK, you might be sick of that character anyways. Or you can come up with an idea of, well, you were all knocked unconscious, but now you're in jail and you have to find a way out. Or you can give them a new set of characters, and it's like, well, your job now is to go rescue your old characters, and then you get to pick which ones you want. Or you can bring them back as ghosts. Or I think my favorite instance of a character dying was on the Penny Arcade live D&D events. The first one that they did, Will Wheaton's character, AFL, had died in a pit of acid on the last podcast. And so it was so awesome watching him just fail over and over again, and then his character just die was great because I'm sadistic. And Jaded. Yeah, we'll go with Jaded.
Jaded joke.
And what ends up happening is the next campaign that they run was for basically his party went to hell to save him and bring him back to the world of the living.
I saw
which
that one.
can be a really unique way to deal with something. Like if you have a party where they really care about the character, take some time off of the actual campaign that you're running and go, well, if you guys want to bring him back, you're going to have to work at it. And it can create this really great dynamic. With the Penny Arcade one, I mean, you had a bunch of comic writers and Will Wheaton. It was hilarious to watch because they all acted just completely hilarious the entire time, and then they finally got to saving his ass, and he held it against them for like 3 or 4 years. Like every single time they brought up his death, he'd sit there as like, well, it's Binwin's fault. So yeah, I mean, I think if you kill off a character and they really don't want to die, I mean, we get to create the worlds that we play in. We can come up with a way as like, well, when he died, his soul went to hell and his body was burned up. But if you can get all the way into hell and somehow secure a new body for him, maybe he can come back. And then you let the characters just go nuts, going, well, how do we get a body? Let's just go kill some random dude on the street, and then we can use his body. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like D&D has all the different planes too, and that's always fun too. Is like if they cross over into a new plane, you can be like, oh look, you just ran into Chuck, who just died last time. And I remember playing a campaign where we had like every 2 weeks we would change, or no, every month we'd change up the DM. And so we were all trying to run these parallel like campaigns, like just set in different planes. And whenever one of the characters died, you could use them in the other. You could like use them in the other plane. And so it was kind of cool to be going along, and you'd see like characters from the other campaign and in your campaign. You kind of play with them back and forth. And then once in a while, you know, we'd jump ship, and one of them would go through the portal instead of the other one, and you could bring them back and that stuff. But yeah, I think like they're only truly dead if the player just decides like, no, I'm just done playing this. And I've done that a couple times where, you know, you just ask the player like, do you want me to figure out a way to bring it back? And they say, no, I'm good. I'm going to try something new. But the first time it ever happens where your character dies, it's like an achievement for the DM, but one of the most gut-wrenching experiences for a player. Like I remember when I killed a player and when my character died, it was like one moment I'm like, oh man. The next time when I was a DM, I did it. I was like, oh, I killed one. I was like, I was really close to killing yours, and I was like, yes, come on. I'm so close.
Sit there, roll higher.
Come on,
Daddy needs a new pair of shoes.
Yeah. I mean, it was exactly like that. I'm just like, come on, I'm gonna kill one of the players on the Wednesday night group. This is gonna be great. And meanwhile, here's him. Oh, nuts! Not again.
And I just kept. The only reason I kept dying. Let me clarify this. The only reason I kept dying was the fact that I can't roll.
Oh yeah, horrible.
Anything. Like people love me as a DM because I never hit them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And things like that.
like even the power gamer looked at your sheet and was like, yeah, you built him right, you just can't roll. And I mean, that is awesome when a power gamer looks at your sheet and says,
this is a great character. How do you
roll.
keep failing?
Yeah, maybe you should get some new dice. No, it's not the dice either. I mean, it was awesome. And then he touched my dice, and I can't play with them anymore because all they do is they roll ones and twos.
Jody did.
Yeah, Jaded Jody came out. He's like, hey.
Oh, never
All
let it.
dwarfing
Never
power.
let somebody lick your dice. No, that's bad.
No, Jody has whenever he plays, he fills his hands full of like Cheeto dust, and then he just like kind of like comes up to you and he's like, "Oh, I ran out of dust. Let me help you." And then
I don't even eat when I play.
he messes things up, and then he tells you he's a theater major. So then he's got to act all this stuff up for you while holding a skull. Oh no, called Mr. Scribbles. We're not getting into that.
Yeah, the more I learn about Jody, the less sure I am if I really ever want to meet him in person.
That tends to be the overall theme I deal with on a daily basis. People meet me and then get to know me and realize that maybe the meeting part wasn't the greatest idea in the
And oddly enough, that's what a lot of people on Match.com say too.
No, we're just joking.
I
We all
had
love you, Jody.
not to get off topic.
I'm sorry.
Not to get off topic. I actually signed up for eHarmony.com and they told me flat out, there is no one we can match you with. Like I just got this blue screen
You're the
up.
Ted Mosby of my team.
They basically just said, listen, super desperate people that are willing to pay to find a date will not date you. Just give up.
And we checked the jail system. No conjugal visits whatsoever out of anybody in that grouping.
So, yeah.
Oh boy. So
we're sober.
to get away from the really depressing reality of Jody's life.
That's why I become the dungeon master, because if I decide that someone is supposed to be with somebody else, I can make it happen, unlike in my real life.
That's why all his characters have an 18 in charisma.
So that leads right into the last point I really want to talk about, and it's called Worse Than Death. Mutilation and other fun stuff that can happen to your character. And I want to start that one off with a little story time. Your stories don't really have to match mine, but or have to match this talking point. But I had a character once I don't even remember the name of the system in the world. I think it was something like Dark Earth or something like that, which was a really nitty-gritty, low fantasy setting with not a lot of magic happening, and you couldn't just regrow lost limbs or something like that. So yeah, and my character was like a Viking type of character with an axe and a shield, and I basically fudged one roll, and the system didn't have any kind of mechanism to correct that, and so a combat wagon or something hit me, and it took off my leg with its sickle wheels. And the whole thing really worked brilliantly, and everybody jumped out of the way and brought their pole axes in and killed everybody on the chariot. Well, I didn't get out of the way, and my character actually lost the leg. And the game master was telling me, well, you can still play that character, and I was like, fuck you, no! There go all your skill points. So everything I could was getting into close combat and then finish enemies off there, and how can you do that with just one leg?
You become Hoppy the Viking.
Yeah, right. So I basically retired that character and made an entirely.
It's just a flesh wound.
What are you going to do? Bleed on me?
Has anything like that happened to one of your characters, or have you done that to some character in your games? Mutilate him, or just suck all the experience points out of them with some evil leeches, or?
I ran a one-shot campaign called The Minds of Madness, which is a joke campaign designed to kill characters off, to the point where you actually tell people to bring 3 or 4 characters with them because they will go through all of them.
Yeah.
And I had in that campaign alone, I killed 2 characters with a worm that was hiding underneath an outhouse that ate them alive. 1 character got killed by getting turned to stone. One got killed by being absorbed by a gelatinous cube. And then one character started off by getting blinded permanently, then turned all of their skin and bones into jello, and then blew themselves up in order to get out of the dungeon, to get out of the mines. So, and every time it happened, like they'd go into a new room and they'd be like, well, what happens if we do this? Well, why don't you find out? Okay, I open the door. You have now, and I turned 2 characters into piles of Electrum coins. And every single time they just like, what can I do? Nothing. Get a new character. And that was fun.
For who?
For I don't. Actually, the players themselves, for the most part, had a blast. I think there was one character that actually lived through the entire thing, and he did so just barely. Like he got out with like 2 hit points.
Hug Hug?
No, Hug Hug. They threw into a room to keep. They used him as his. Hug Hug was a little goblin that was their little partner, and so they used him to detect traps as opposed to trying to actually detect them. They just throw him into a room, and if he died or if he tripped a trap, that meant that, well, that trap can't be tripped again.
He's the canary.
Yeah, so they killed him off in like 20 minutes. 4-hour campaign, 20 minutes, and they've already killed off their little helper.
Yeah, there's a Warhammer has that fantasy setting, and now they have 40K and Dark Heresy, and those are some pretty horrific campaign settings, because you can get into those, and they're really gritty, and in most of their combats like location based. And you roll like a D100, and I remember a couple of times where like you'd roll a D100, and usually it's in your chest, but I got unlucky kind of like with Hoppy the Viking. I got nailed in my left hand, and it sliced off my sword hand, and I had to go back to training and learning how to be a sword and board guy without being able to hold the shield in my hand anymore. But those, like the death traps and the mutilation stuff from in D&D is kind of tame nowadays. It used to be like we were talking about earlier with like color spray. It used to be the most annoying thing ever. It would daze, confuse, and blind, and then knock your wisdom down. So then here you are trying to make a wisdom safety check, and you can't do it because it's knocked your points down by 2. I think back in the 90s it was like 4 points to knock it down. So basically, to get over a 10, you were almost at a minus number at that point. And if you're playing like me, a dumb fighter who has an 8, oh my gosh, look at that, you're comatose at 4. And it's just like, yeah, I'm not going to make any of these saves, so I'm just going to sit here and watch the rest of my game. Everybody else keep going by while I'm doing this the whole time. Is this a monster? Is this a monster? It was great when we had a female elf, but it wasn't so great when I ran into the gelatinous cube. So, yeah. That was my adventure.
I think the sometimes worse than death is the disability that takes you out of the ability to play your character. You've been knocked unconscious, you've been possessed, all of these things that take the character out of your control one way or another, where you basically make the person into a bystander watching the other players run through the game for a while. The possessions...
Or turning... I've been... some of the characters in the campaign that I've been playing recently have been succubi, who can charm creatures.
Sure.
Which is so much fun, because then not only are you taken out of like the battle, you are now actively fighting against the team that you've been trying to help, and it's just really fun to watch someone sit there and go, wait a minute, what? You are charmed now. I want you to make I want you to cast this spell on this group of people. That does like 66 damage. Yep. But I'm going to kill them. And I said, well, and if you miss, they're probably going to kill you. Oh.
Good old succubus.
Yeah, I've had situations where that sort of charm or hypnosis or possession takes over a character, and sometimes I'll just give the player the sort of the situation where they've just had their loyalties reversed and now they're playing their character. One of the things I've often used is something of a player mechanism, a grace roll. At the beginning of the game session, they roll a d20 and they write down whatever that number is, and they can, once per game, substitute that for some other roll that they've made. And I had one player who started off the game and he rolled his d20 and he got a 1 for his grace roll, so he marks that down. And then later in the game he gets possessed and he turns around and has to try and throw something at somebody else who rolls really, really well, and he used his grace roll to actually flub the roll in the situation, so he managed to save the life of a fellow character even while his character was possessed by a clever and quick application of the grace roll in that situation. But possession and a lot of those things that take you away from being able to control the game or play the character the way you want to play it, any of those things are, in a way, sometimes worse than death.
So I think that's a really nice point to end, or really nice thought to end the show on. Gentlemen, it's been a blast. Next month's topic will probably be power gamers and power gaming, and how knowing the system can help or not help with the game. And I would be really happy to see all of you lovely viewers again next month. So, but I really want to end the show with one last story time. So, anybody?
Like seriously, we've been spending like half of this thing have been us. Well, once upon a time, we did this, and
it's been an hour.
Jody, just die in your chair, will you?
What did you do?
I just said die in your chair. Oh shit. I didn't know my jamming powers work here. Nick, I just can't let you get away with that. Okay, so sorry. Okay, so bye.